Welcome back to Reclaiming America. We have another great show today, very special show. I'm Bill, one of the co-hosts.
I'm Greta.
And I'm Dan. Bill, why don't you introduce our awesome guest today?
We have with us today Howie Franklin, who a great person in Brunswick County. He's done a lot of good for the county, but he's there for a very specific reason. He had a very unusual job for the rest of us as far as it's concerned. He was the chief steward on Air Force One for 5 presidents. He's actually got a book out there outlining it too. So anyway, Howie, how are you? And welcome.
I'm doing great. It's beautiful on the beach.
Yeah, it is. It's a great day down here at the beach area. I'm sure it is. So anyway, who are the presidents that you were chief steward for?
Well, I worked for Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton. He's guilty, but he was a nice guy. I actually was the chief steward for Bush and Clinton. Other than that, I was the flight examiner on the airplane for all the other presidents. So I flew with all the other presidents, but I wasn't the direct chief. I was for the two.
What does the flight examiner do?
Well, every year, everybody in that crew position has to take a written exam, and they have to be observed on a whole trip to see if they can meet the standards and things of that nature. So I was the guy that made sure that took place.
Interesting. I'm sure you've got hundreds of stories about 5 presidents in 20, 30 years with that, I guess. Yeah. Going up and down the road. What's your favorite story?
I don't know. There were so many. I mean, President Ford, one of the things I'd like to say about President Ford, there was a myth that he was a klutz, things of that nature. The man was one of the best athletes we ever had as a president. We were in Salzburg, Austria, and he was down almost at the foot of the steps and tripped and then rolled. If you see the picture, he rolled like an athlete. Then he hit his head going into the helicopter. I hit my head several times. You got to duck, you got to catch it. And they Saturday Night Live picked it up and said, he was a klutz. He was a black diamond skier. You can't be a klutz and be a black diamond skier, and he was an avid skier. If you were Secret Service and you worked for Ford, you better know how to ski. So he was a class athlete and a class person. So that's that one myth. One of the stories that I like to share, we have several dogs here at the airport that come in and out. And when they come in, they come running to me. Well, during the George H. Bush administration, he had 2 dogs, Ranger and Millie. And they were only on the aircraft when we were going to San Kennebunkport on vacation. And then Jeb Bush would be there with his family, George W. with his family. A very happy time because they're leaving Washington. And going to Maine in the summertime in August, not a bad idea. Climate's very nice and things of that nature. Anyway, I go in the stateroom and all the passengers would put their luggage down, the presidential family, and I secure their luggage so it wouldn't fly all over the place. And when the 2 dogs, when I left, the 2 dogs would follow me out of the stateroom. Later on, the president of the United States walking around the airplane, he sees me and the 2 dogs are with me. I don't think a thing of it. That weekend, I had to go up to the house in Kennebunkport. We stayed in Portsmouth, so I traveled about an hour up in Maine to go to the house to do something for Mrs. Bush. And the president was on the back of his house moving some furniture around. The dog saw me at the gate, was about 150 yards away. He came running to the gate and saw me and met me. So anyway, I don't think a thing of it because they always did it. I'm a dog person. I'm not thinking anything of it. And if you can imagine this, return trip to Washington, D.C., the president of the United States walks up to me quietly and privately and says, Howie, I hate to admit it, but you're making me jealous. Now, the last thing in the world I want is the president to be jealous of me. I was flabbergasted. I said, what do you mean, sir? He said, well, you know how much I love my dogs. I said, yes, sir. He said, they seem to love you more than they love me. I said, I reached in my pocket and I said, sir, I got treats in my pocket. And the funny thing, he was elated. He was so happy. It wasn't me. It was the treats. So
interesting story. That works with Dan also, by the way, putting treats in your pocket.
Wow. Taking shots at me already, Bill? Game on.
Okay.
Oh, my goodness. Y'all so bad.
What kind of stories?
Sorry, I got it.
Okay. What kind of stories did we have with the Clinton administration, Howie? Anything that
Well,
sticks in your mind?
Bill Clinton was one. I'm not political. Okay, when I deal with these people, I deal with them on a personal level. And my first of all, my job on Air Force One, the Air Force One's main mission is to provide secure and safe air transportation for the president. Number two is to provide all the services that the White House provides for the president, only in the airplane, in the air, and around the world. And my job, I was in charge of all the personal needs of all the customers or the passengers on the airplane. My job was to provide a comfortable but professional atmosphere. And we worked very diligently at that. Sometimes we couldn't get them off the damn airplane. So, but anyway, and Bill Clinton came along. He was 1 year younger than me. So he was the first one that was close to my age. And he was the first one that listened to rock and roll that I know of. Now, all the other presidents listened to music. Predominantly, a lot of them listen to country music. I like country music, but a lot of them listen to the ones, my marriage is a failure, my divorce ain't working out either stuff. So the President Clinton, he listened to rock and roll, and that was right down my alley. I grew up with rock and roll, and when we designed the 747, the radio operators and the communicators was not used to having a president that was a musician that liked music predominantly. So anyway, we when they designed the airplane, when the president wanted to listen to music in his stateroom, the whole aircraft had to listen to it, the same music, and the whole aircraft had to listen to it at the same volume. So I went to the radio operators and I said, we can solve this problem. I'll buy him one of those boxes where we can put discs and tapes in there, and he can listen to his own music in the stateroom. And they did it. We put Air Force One on it. I presented it to him, and I said, sir, in the old days they would have spent $3 million rewiring the airplane. He said, you guys are reinventing government. I said, you can take this box with you, and you take it even to your hotel and listen to the music. And one time I stepped to the stateroom, and he was playing Cecilia, You're Breaking My Heart, and it was real loud. And he stopped me and said, Howie, is this too loud? I said, sir, I've been waiting for a guy like you to come along for a long time. He was extremely personable and a great communication. I have a New York Times crossword puzzle here in my office that he had done. I saw him do the New York Times crossword puzzle in a period of 15 to 20 minutes while carrying on business at the same time. Very sharp, very, 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 and he liked me. I liked him. One time we were going to Florida, and I get his schedule, everything that he's doing, and I realized that he wasn't getting any time off. All he was doing is politic and campaigning for the Democratic Party. And so Steve Lomanak, who lives here in Brunswick County now, works at the Oak Island Golf Course. He was my deputy at the time. I set it up so he entered the stateroom from one end and I entered from the other end of the room. The president was sitting there about 8 to 10 feet from us, and I whispered loud enough so the president would hear. And I said, hey, Steve, did you bring your golf clubs? And Steve said, yeah, I brought my golf clubs. Well, the president heard us say that. And he turned, he said, you guys playing golf? I said, yeah, we're playing golf. You're not playing golf? He said, I'll be damned. He said, I'm down here raising all this money for these folks. I can't get 4 hours off to play golf, and you guys are going to go play golf. I said, and we're the ones that clean the airplane, but he's not playing golf. He said, where are you playing golf at? I said, we're playing at Doral. He says, you're playing golf at Doral? I said, yeah, we're playing there free because we know you. And he threw his hands up in the air.
That's a great story. I love it. I have a question that I've been waiting to ask this one. So you talked about the presidents, but you must have met many, many more other world leaders, other celebrities and all that. Of all the guests that would have come on to Air Force One, who was your favorite, or do you have a great story about any one of them?
Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio. I did a show and tell for Frank Sinatra. A lot of celebrities, like you said. I'll tell you a little story about the Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams. The gentleman I mentioned before, and he speaks around here, different places also. And this is one of the stories that he tells. He was new on the crew. And new people on the crew were still starstruck because we had so many celebrities and presidents and vice presidents, or former vice presidents and presidents on the board on the airplane. And we were getting ready to take off. So a new crew member would check the manifest to see who the celebrities would be on the airplane. I didn't. I didn't check. I didn't care either way. We treated everybody as a VIP. My goal was the person in the last seat of the airplane gets the same service as the president of the United States. Anyway, Steve calls me in the back and he said, "We got Ted Williams on the airplane." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I don't know what I do. He's my hero. He's my star. He's my father's star. He was an Air Force pilot and he became a super baseball player and everything." He said, "I don't know what I do." I said, "Well, you'll get used to this now. I mean, when you get more time you spend, you'll get less starstruck. It'll work out real well." Well, I got to give you a little side story. Steve's from Northern Philly. He's got a security clearance only through the grace of God. He's a tough guy from Philly. And when we play golf with the group, I put on the card Howie, Johnny, Stevie, just like that. Didn't think anything of it. So one day I called his house and his son answered the phone and I said, "Is Stevie there?" And his son started laughing. I said, "What's the matter, Mike?" He said, "Nobody calls my dad Steve." He's Philadelphia. You don't call him Stevie. He's the only guy who gets calls him Stevie is you because you're his boss. I said, "I didn't know that. If I knew that he didn't like it, I wouldn't have done that." So anyway, we go back to the Ted Williams story. So I go up front and the president says to me, "Hey, we got Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio. We give him a show and tell through the airplane." I picked one of my other guys. I said, "Hey, Pat, give Joe DiMaggio. I'll take Ted Williams." So I'm taking him through the airplane. He's a real nice guy. And I'm feeding him some best souvenirs, Air Force One cards and some pens and quite a few different things. And he's a real nice guy. So we get back to the VIP area where he's seated. And I said, "Sir, I need a favor." He said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Well, the gentleman that's fixing your meal today is in the galley and he just idolizes you. He absolutely goes crazy over you. And he never knew, he has no idea what he'd do if he ever got to meet you. I'd like to bring him up here and introduce you to him." He said, "Sure, you got to take good care of the cook." I said, "Sure." I said, "But I need you to make a big deal out of this." He said, "Sure, we can do that." So anyway, I go back and get Steve. He's got his apron on. I said, "No, leave your apron on." And we come up. He enters the VIP lounge with Ted Williams, and Ted Williams jumps him. "Stevie, how you doing, buddy? We got to do lunch someday. Hey, this is fantastic." Okay. I mean, he really did a great job at it. And my friend Steve turns around. He's walking back to the galley. He says, "I finally met the man of my dreams, and the man calls me Stevie."
That's a great story.
But I think he threw some vulgarity in there.
I'll bet he did. That is wonderful story. Wonderful story. So let me ask the other side of that question. Was there anyone that, I know you got to be polite about it, that maybe was a little bit more difficult?
Yeah, well, in my book, I treated everything very positive because I had a positive with most people, majority of the people. The only person that I had problems with on the airplane in the past was Jody Powell. He was the press secretary for President Carter. The problem we had was he was President Carter, I think, got him into the Air Force Academy, and he got thrown out of the Air Force Academy for cheating. So he didn't like the Air Force. On Air Force One, every meal, if it's a state meal, we're flying around the United States, everybody's on per diem. We charge everybody. Everybody gets a bill for their meal. And it's, in other words, if I buy a breakfast, I buy breakfast for the crew and the passengers, which is about 100 people. I divide what the cost was by the number of people, and that comes out with the price of the meal. And I have a bill at the end of the day for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, beverages, and I would stamp that and I'd send that to the White House. Well, for some reason, Jody Powell thought we were cheating him. How we could cheat him, I have no idea. So they brought only administration ever had this policy. At the end of the day, I had to bring the bill to the person and have them check it and sign off on it. So when I went to Jody Powell, he looked at it, and he's the one who caused this situation. He marked it all off and signed it, rolled it up, and actually threw it at me on the floor. So, what goes around comes around also. So anyway, that was probably the most trying person I have had. Now, we had a lot of humor on there. I'll give you the one time. You remember everybody here, Sam Donaldson?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
sure.
Sam Donaldson was a real go-getter, and he whatever you saw, he was an extrovert, and really liked all kinds of popularity and stuff like that. And so he used to be a White House correspondent, and he went on to be an anchor, and he was making some good money. So one day he was on the airplane again for some reason, and Marlon Fitzwater, the press secretary, said, "Hey Howie, we got Sam Donaldson back on the airplane." I says, "Yeah." He says, he's making $2 million a year. I mean, $1 million a year now. I said, "Really?" I said, "I knew him when he was making 250,000." He says, "You ought to go back and spill coffee on him and say, oops, you spilled coffee on $1 million man. He'll love the recognition of it," which he would. So I go in the back. I took that opportunity and went into the press area. Helen Thomas, senior White House correspondent, is sitting there, and they were all drinking coffee. They had little plastic coffee cups with the presidential seal on it, good looking plastic and things. And they all liked that, and they're all drinking their coffee. And I nudged the table, and I said, in front of all the press, I said, "Oops, I almost spilled coffee on $1 million man." And Helen goes, "What's Howie doing now?" So anyway, Sam's smiling because I just called him out. He's $1 million man. I said, "Sam," I said, "I remember when you're making $250,000 a year." He says, "Yeah." I said, "I remember when you made $500,000 a year." He says, "Yeah." I said, "I remember when we landed in California with Ronald Reagan, a helicopter came to pick up the president and a helicopter came to pick up Sam Donaldson." I got him. He's just gleaming. Okay. And I said, "Now you're making $1 million a year." And he just, "Yeah." And I said, "I understand Willard Scott's making $2 million a year." And he used vulgarity at me at that time also.
And for those that don't know, Willard Scott was a weatherman.
I remember when we talked. Yeah.
Howie, question. You had 5 presidents with you. What about the first ladies? How were they
That was my question. The family.
the
The
family?
first family.
Okay, you take it then.
Which of the first family did you actually enjoy the most?
Well, they were all, when you reach that level, you've been through a lot of checking out things of that nature. The president and the first family is usually the easiest passengers on the whole airplane most of the time. The senior staff and staffers that are trying to book for promotion and things, those are the people you got to be careful of. But the first ladies were all very nice. Nancy Reagan, Johnny Carson said, "People who are shy come across aloof."
Mhm.
And Nancy was very shy, and she was very, very protective of the president. But we liked it. There was clear lines. She's the first lady with a crew and things of that nature. One time, she's very much involved with image, as you say. The best example, you never saw President Reagan after he got sick. I mean, the image of him you still see. His clothes. When Reagan suits that he wore, all his pockets were always sewn shut, so he couldn't put his hands in his pockets for it, or they wouldn't put any change or any wallets or anything in his pockets. It was very normal when we went to California with the president. The day before, we'd take a first lady, and when the first lady travels, she doesn't travel on Air Force One. She travels on a squadron airplane. It's called Sam Fox 289 or whatever it is. Anyway, we would take her to California, and we'd take her to Phoenix, Arizona to visit her dad, and then the next day we take her into California. So she always ordered salad. She ate very wisely, and she also liked the temperature in the airplane about 85 degrees.
Oh,
And she'd look at me and she said, "Am I the only one cold on here?" I said, "Maybe so." But anyway, my people that worked for me were very creative. She had ordered chicken salad, and it was what I call California chicken salad. It had soup, the nuts, and grapes, and it looked very nice. Well, she consumed the salad, and she was very polite about it. She asked me to sit down. I sat down across the table. I'm about 3 feet away from her face to face. And one of the things she'd look at you and she'd stare at you, And I had just read a book. If you were looking at a certain direction, you were creating, and if you were looking at another direction, you were trying to remember. And I said, I'm not moving my eyes because I forgot what to do. And but she said to me very graciously, she said, Howie, that was a great lunch. It was good chicken salad, but if you take a chicken breast and you boil it off in water and you don't overcook it, I said, yes, ma'am. She said, then you chill it and you chop it up real fine and take some really fine celery and chop up, add some good mayonnaise. You end up with good chicken, tastes like chicken salad.
Yes.
So I had to go back and somehow I prepared the chicken salad for my people so they could taste it and say this is what you like, and they all liked it. They all agreed. Um, I was very gracious, very very lucky. Everything that I've done in my life, I thank God for it because I wasn't planning on it, and I really tell you, He put me in these different positions and prepared me for it. And I didn't even know I was being prepared for it. Rosalind, her name's Rose Lynn, not Rosalind. Okay. During the Carter administration, the Ayatollah had our hostages, and the president dedicated himself to get the hostages released. So he took Rosalind went out on a campaign trail for about a year and a half. We were trying to get votes for her husband. They peeled me and another gentleman, Denny Stump, off from the crew, and I stayed with Rosalind with Rosalind with Rosalind for 1.5 years with her, and so you get close. When I first worked with her as a first lady, the protocol was I was supposed to talk to one of her ladies. I wasn't allowed to talk to her. That was just the protocol. I have no problem with that. It was about 2 weeks into the flying with her, she'd say, Howie, come here. So we got very comfortable. I was very honored, not last year when she passed away, but the summer before, she invited me to her 95th birthday. And down in Plains, Georgia, and President Carter was 98 at the time. And I gave her a picture of her and I, and she looked at it and she said, Howie, that's you. I said, yeah, and that's you. She said, we look like teenagers. But she was a delightful, she was very sharp. She was a very people person. She wrote her speeches. She spoke fluent Spanish. I'll tell you how close we were. And I don't mean anything negative by this, but this gives you an example. On the airplane, we were on there for a long period of time, and you get to know each other very well. And I had access to the whole airplane in the stateroom, and as I said, it's a squadron airplane. It's not Air Force One. We were getting ready to land at some place where they were going to campaign, and there was 6 ladies in the stateroom. First lady sitting in her seat, some lady sitting across from her, 4 ladies sitting at another table close by. I stepped in the room, and I don't know what I didn't expect anything that to be abnormal, but all the ladies in there had their dresses pulled up to their waist, and they were pulling their pantyhose up.
Oh, no.
Oh no.
You can imagine, right? And Rosalind looked at all the panicky ladies, and she said, "It's just Howie."
That's a great story. And guess what, kids?
It's time for a break.
Time for a break. So give us a couple of minutes and we'll be right back on Reclaiming America.
Welcome back to Reclaiming America. We're having a fascinating conversation with Howie Franklin, who worked on Air Force One with 5 presidents. And, that's 5 of them. You think about that. That's like 25, 30 years on that plane with a multitude of stories. And we've had a great time up to this point. And we're now going to zero in on one of my favorite presidents, which is Ronald Reagan. So you got any good stories for Ronald?
I got a whole bunch of them. I mean, I worked for Ronald Reagan for 8 years. And, I've been around a lot of politicians most of my life. The whole time I was in the Air Force in the 89th, 24 years with flying VIPs and congressmen, senators. My trainer was, show you a picture of. Can you see that?
Got to bring it up a little bit.
You're kidding.
Henry
No,
Kissinger.
Yes.
And I'll bring it up a little more.
Yeah, we got it.
We
We
got
got
it.
who it is.
We got it.
Look at the signature
Okay.
there.
Now he signed that to me, appreciation. I worked with him during the National Security Council, and then he became Secretary of State. I traveled with him in the Paris Peace Accords back and forth to Paris. I was with him opening up China before Nixon even got in there, and I was with him during the Middle East shuttle diplomacy. He was the toughest gentleman. You know, management at one time, all management led through fear and intimidation, and Henry led through fear and intimidation. He was very fair. And I found out, you know, from Long Island, New York, you got to have a sense of humor, but don't baloney people. As long as you didn't give him baloney, he'd go along with it. And he said, "Did you do that?" "Yes, sir, I did." "Don't do it again." "That's fine, but start giving baloney, you're out of there." He paid me the greatest compliment I ever had in my life. This gentleman looked at me and said, "You treat me better than an old Jewish mother."
Ooh, that is a
That's
compliment.
a good one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and he didn't say that to many people, but he was my trainer, and we went on from there into the Carter administration. Now, I'll be a little political with you if you don't mind.
Please
Um,
do.
Not at all.
Kissinger, in the end of his term when he was Secretary of State, we had all over the Middle East shuttle diplomacy. I was with him. Al Haig was a full colonel.
Hold on.
Rumsfeld was a GS 9 or 10. Uh, Bolton was a GS. He was on the staff. Winston Lord became the second ambassador to Red China. These were all staffers with Kissinger, and they went on and on. Um, the director, the head of the Secret Service, became very, very up in the Secret Service, and I became the chief of Air Force One. So, you know, we were all trained by Henry. One time we couldn't chat, going back and forth to Damascus, and there was posters wanted dead or alive, and he had Secret Service people with him, and of course he was concerned. So we came back and we were on the ground in Tel Aviv, and he carried all his information and with him. He didn't trust any embassy to send any information back to Nixon. Everything was sent through the airplane, classified. We're on the ground in foot of the steps in Tel Aviv, and he turned to Hank Schwobel, the Secret Service agent. And he said, "You know, Hank, I'm really concerned about all these death threats I'm getting." And Hank looked at him and said, "Don't worry, sir. We'll never let them take you alive."
Boy,
Which was a good thing. Which was a good thing. You understand?
yeah, you're probably right on that.
Anyway, Henry Kissinger said his statement as he left office in the Arab world. His statement was, "Until the Arab nations evolve, you give all the Arabs the same amount of bullets, and you give Israel more bullets than everybody else, and you stay out of their civil wars." That's what he said in '76. I tend to think he was correct. Anyway, we went on to Ronald Reagan, and I've been around a lot of politicians, like I said before. I knew he was the governor of California. I knew he was an actor. I actually liked George H. Bush's resume, but he was running against Reagan for the nomination for the Republican Party. But so Reagan won. And I want you to know, folks, I tried to catch him being phony for 8 years. I over and above laid for him. This guy can't be this good. He was. I couldn't catch it. He was sincere about everything he did and say. When they wrote a speech for Ronald Reagan, it was Ronald Reagan. That's what he wanted to say in the speeches and things of that nature. If I did something like insignificant, brought him into his stateroom, that's the president, myself, he could be anybody he wants, and brought him something insignificant like a fresh glass of ice water, he would stop and do something specifically, non-verbally or verbally to me to raise my self-esteem. That's a boss. He
Yep.
didn't do that. And for somebody to do that for somebody else, they have to be very secure in themselves, or they can't do that to other people. Now, he loved California. If we were going to Ohio, he'd say to me, "Howie, we're going in the right direction, but we're not going far enough." One time we were going to Texas, and he was running a little late. And he came up to me, got real close. He said, "Howie." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "They're sending me to Texas." I said, "Well, yes, sir." He said, "Yeah, but they're sending me to a turkey shoot." I said, "Well, yes, sir. What's the problem?" He said, "I got enough turkeys in Washington. I don't need to go to Texas."
That's great.
I like that
And
one.
one time we were going to California, and he was in the conference room, and the staff was in the other end of the conference room, and they were finished their work early. The president was writing letters and answering things on this little desk on the other end of this conference room. No one thinks he's paying attention to anything the staff is saying, and they somehow the subject came up at that time. Mickey Rooney was alive, and Hollywood was considering making a life story of Mickey Rooney. And so the staff was discussing this potential movie, and finally somebody in the group said, "Well, who are they going to get to play Mickey Rooney?" And at the time, Mickey Rooney was alive, and so finally they mentioned a few names, and then somebody in the group said, "What about getting Mickey Rooney to play Mickey Rooney?" And then the president looked at the group and said, "He's too short."
Oh,
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
Yeah, he was really a character. I'll give you one that says more about him than anything else. I have a picture here in my office of with him 2 years after he left office. We were flying with President George H. Bush. We were going to California. His secretary knew that we were in town, and she called me up and said the boss wants to see the crew. So we were able to get 17 of us together, and we went to his office in California. And some of the crews had never, even though because they were in a 747, their crew members upstairs, they never even met a president, or they hadn't been at a lot of functions and things like that with the president. So I said to them, look, if you meet a president, the normal thing, he's going to have some presents there wrapped up. There's going to be a photographer there. You're going to come in. He's going to call you over. He's going to shake your hand, give you a present, take a picture with him and the president, and that's what you usually get. And that's very normal for that to happen. So we line up. The first gentleman comes up. He's got a present. Photographer's there. I know the Secret Service that's in the office with him, and after the picture was taken, the president points to his office, tells the gentleman to get in his office. Next thing you know, 17 of us go through, get our picture taken, and he tells us to get in the office. We're all in the office. President Reagan comes in, closes the door, spends 45 minutes with the crew in his office. It was incredible. And he was sharp. He wasn't, we had the dementia that was coming, but at this point he was sharp as could be. And I never noticed a thing on the airplane while he was in office that he was not sharp or anything like that. And we walked out of there, and one of the colonels that had never flown with him came up to me, and he was all excited. He said, Chief, he said, that was incredible. That was fantastic. I said, well, what do you mean, sir? He said, the man was excited about meeting me. So, I mean, that was fantastic. But the part of the story goes on. A couple of months after that, John Belletta, and I have a book of his in my office here also, he wrote a book about him because he was the head agent for his detail. And if you went with Ronald Reagan, you better know how to ride horses. And that's how he got the job. He was the one agent that knew how to ride horses. So anyway, 6 months after I told you that meeting we had with him, John noticed that the onset of the disease was getting worse. Now, the passion of Ronald Reagan's life was to ride horses. Now, not only did he ride the horses, he loved shoveling the manure and cutting bush down and stuff like that, working on the ranch. That was his passion. He truly loved that. So anyway, John said he saw the president go riding a horse, and all of a sudden the dementia would come on, and he got really upset about this. So he went to Nancy Reagan. He said, the onset of the disease is getting worse, and there's times where he doesn't know whether he's going into it. And I think he could get hurt. My job is to keep him safe, and we have to curtail the horseback riding. And Nancy looked at him and said, well, you tell him.
oh no.
Which was probably the right thing to do because they had a professional and a personal relationship. John Belletta told me personally, and it's in his book and it's in my book. I had to put it in there. He found the right moment. It was usually, I say, good meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's fresh, and the president was in tune and knew everything that was going on. And he turned to the president more graciously than I'm sharing with you right now and said, you understand about your disease, sir. You understand the onset, it can get worse, and it will get worse. And we're very concerned about your safety and the horses, and we have to curtail the horseback riding. John Boletta then told me, you know what his first response, Reagan's first response to John was? To console John for having to tell him that.
Aw.
Hmm.
That's somebody.
Yeah, that is.
I don't care about your politics.
That's the
He
quality of the
knew
man.
how difficult, and it was taking away the passion of the man's life.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, he was quite my wife, who was a school teacher here in Brunswick County for many, many years, retired from it. She worked for Ronald Reagan as administrative assistant for 4 years on the airplane. Uh, you around the thing that was crazy, you could catch yourself worshiping this guy.
Yeah.
If you got around him within 8 feet, you felt energy.
Yes.
And the crazy thing is, he didn't want you to worship him, and that made you want to worship him more. You know, he was really incredible. So, and he was the real guy. I mean, he even looked like the president when I woke him up when he was sleeping.
Yeah,
Now that's tough.
one of the things I always wondered how is how are they behind the scenes, the presidents? Because when they're in front of cameras, that they're out in public, they have to be quote unquote the president. But when they're behind the scenes, from what you're telling us, they're really not that much different than you and I. They're they put their pants on the same way we do, that type of thing. But is there, when you're watching them try and accomplish whatever it is they need to get done on a regular day, how does that work into who they are as a person? Do you see what they do in the public? Is it different behind the scenes, or is it basically the same?
No, it's what behind the scenes, they're all like you said, they're all real people. They all put their pants on, whatever. They all hurt, they all cry, they all feel that what things of that nature. Some of them are a little more serious about what they're doing at different things, and some of them are not. It's all politics, how you talk and when you talk and things of that nature. Uh, well, like I said, most of the people the five that I worked with, and I flew as a backup with Richard Nixon and things of that nature. He was a very private person and very strong leadership within a small group. Some people have different leaderships. George W., as an example, and I mean, I knew him, he knows me. Uh, he was very strong in a small group. On television, he didn't look that great. It all depends how the camera looks at you and things of that nature. But you hit it on a point. They're real people behind the scenes. They feel, they hurt. Talking about, just jump to Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. I can verify that Hillary carries Tabasco sauce in her purse. I guarantee it. She likes spicy stuff. And so be careful with everything you hear or read. Sometimes it's blown out of proportion very easily.
So she carries Tabasco sauce in her purse?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I could say so much, but I'm going to be quiet.
So you better be good. Okay. Quick question, Howie. How often did you get a chance to interact with, I know that Carter and Clinton had younger children. Were they involved in the Air Force One at all, March at all, or what?
Well, if we were most of the time, the children on the airplane when we were going on vacation or things of that nature. So I'll go back to Hillary again with their daughter Chelsea. She was very mothering. I mean, if Chelsea sat there and she was a young, early teenager or young, and I forget exactly how old she was, and if she had a piece of paper and she dropped it, Hillary would make sure she cleaned it up. She was very mothering, and the three of them, they played cards all the time. They really cared about each other. They were very, very tight. I was one of the guys that said I don't think they'd get a divorce because they do have great respect for each other's talents, and they enjoyed each other very much. And they were very. One of the things about Bill, this was in the book. I'm the only one in the world that worked for 5 presidents consecutively, and I'm probably the only one in the world that did what I'm about to tell you. We were going to Moscow. It was early in the Clinton administration, and his mother had passed away. Bill's mother passed away, and he was very close with his mother. And he was at a funeral in Little Rock for 3 days. He returns to Andrews Air Force Base at 9:30 at night with a Gulfstream, and he gets off the Gulfstream. We're sitting there with the 747 hot, ready to go. We're going to Moscow to a summit. Now this is 9:30 at night. You're ready to take your shoes off, and Ted Koppel's doing Nightline on the airplane, making a summit. So he's going to walk upstairs. He's got to go to work right away. and he was very good at that. Um, do they like that? No. Behind the scenes, no, they don't like that. Anyway, he also stayed. Clinton had a history of staying up late. He liked to stay up late, and when you woke him up, he was difficult to wake up. So George Stephanopoulos used to say, "Let Howie wake him up. He likes Howie." Anyway, I finally, after the nightline is done and everything like that, I finally got Hillary up in the front of the airplane. Is a private stateroom. I had the beds already made up. There's a bed on the right and the left. I got Hillary in there at the bed, and 30 minutes later, I got President Clinton in there to bed. On their body time, they only had 2.5 hours sleep. I woke him up at 3 o'clock in the morning, Washington time. Now he came from a funeral. He's doing Nightline. He stayed up late, and he finally got to bed. And when I stepped in that stateroom, I had 1 hour and 30 minutes from that moment that the door was going to open on Air Force One in Moscow, and he's got to walk out. I should have took 2 hours to get him ready, but I felt terrible about he had no sleep, and I got to get the first lady up and things of that nature. So when I went in there, I went to him, and I moved his body a little bit, and he kind of moaned, and I said, "Boy, I hate to do this." And he yelled to the top of his lungs, "Well, don't do it." That's a direct order for the President of the United States to a Chief Master Sergeant of the United States Air Force. Well, if he's not up and ready to go, who are they going to blame? So I said to him, "Sir, it's time to get your butt up and go to work." Now, but I didn't say the word "but." My agent said, "Don't say the other word." Anyway, and he said, "Oh, okay." And he got up. And now that language that I used him was common to him. Okay, and he was okay with it. And but now Hillary is now laughing because she just heard Howie tell her husband to get his out of bed and go to work. She started laughing. I turned to Hillary. I said, "Don't you laugh. You're next. Let's go." And they hadn't had their coffee yet. Remember, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I got somebody bringing them coffee, and we have a shower on the 747. The only guy had clothes on in there was me. Okay, that's how close you are with these folks. And so, I mean, there's not many people in the world told the president to get his out of bed, and he was okay with it. How's that?
I think that's great, but we've reached that point again, Howie. We have to take another commercial break, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes, everybody, on Reclaiming America with some fascinating stories.
Yes.
Welcome back to Reclaiming America. We're going into our final session. We got with us Howie Franklin, who has been the chief steward and on Air Force One for 5 presidents. We've been having fascinating stories about our presidents, their families, some of the great things that have happened in the, I guess, 25 years or so he was flying with them. Can you tell us a little bit more about GW, though? That's kind of something we missed a little bit today.
Yeah, I know, but I got to correct something because I'll take a hit. Okay, I was the chief steward for President Bush and also in President Clinton. I was a steward on the airplane working with the 5 presidents. I do that in the respect of all the former chiefs that I worked for. And so one time they did an article interview me with the Charlotte Observer and said I was the chief steward for 5 presidents. Somebody took that out of context, and next thing you know, everybody was jealous and upset. I didn't. And the fact that I'm a chief.
Fair.
Yeah. So what was the question again?
Tell us a little bit about the relationships with George W. Bush.
Well, I got a good one. I was down speaking in Savannah to an aviation group in Georgia, and I was at this 5-star hotel, and I was sitting in the lobby, and I see this gentleman walk in, and it looked like Jeb Bush. But I didn't say anything to him. So later on, I was a keynote speaker at this event, and I went upstairs. So I got a sport coat on and a tie, and everybody else in that was going to observe me, they had golf clothes on. And so I went up and I went to get a little something to eat at where they fed us. And the lady said, "No, no, you're not here. You're around the corner." So I go around the corner. I look in this room. Wasn't my group. There was some heavy duty folks in there, and one of them was Jeb Bush. It looked like to me. And so I looked, and there was a handler at the door. And I said, "Is that Governor Bush?" He said, "Yes, sir, that is." I said, "Boy, I know him. I used to work for his father. I'd like to say hello." Well, the handler was doing what he's supposed to do. He was preventing me from doing it. I was getting more polite, but it wasn't working. Next thing you know, Jeb saw me, so he came over to the door and he says, "Howie, what the hell are you doing here?" I said, "I'm here telling stories about you." He said, "What are you telling about me?" And this goes to George W. We were going to Kennebunkport again. Jenna was maybe 5 or 6 years old, young girl, and she was sitting on a couch. Governor Sununu, who was the chief of staff, who's the former governor of New Hampshire, was sitting there. George W. was standing there, and I was standing there. So you got a picture on the couch is Governor Sununu and Jenna and George W. and myself. And Jenna was playing with her tooth. So I'm telling the story to Jeb. Jenna was playing with a tooth. It was real loose. And Governor Sununu looked at her in front of her father and said, "If you lose that tooth and you put it under the pillow, the tooth fairy will come and give you $2,000.
Oh,
Well, Jeb Bush threw his hands up in the air. He said, "Not in my family." I said, "That's what your brother said at the time."
oh,
Oh man.
So, I mean, remember, they're real people. They
They
care.
are.
It's very much so.
Howie, one thing we've been kind of been bouncing around, but we really haven't talked about it. Tell us a little bit about Air Force One, because I'm sure people are fascinated by that plane.
Yeah, well, they had the two 707s. The first 707 a president flew on, I got a picture of it. It was Kennedy flew on. It was 970. That's out in Seattle in the Boeing Museum. Um, and then they came two 6000. Two 6000 was the 707 that John F. Kennedy's body was flown back from Texas and President Johnson was sworn in on. And that airplane has a lot of history. It's in the Wright-Patterson Air Force Museum. Senator Dirksen, we carried Mamie Eisenhower on the airplane. It's got a lot of history like that. And then there's two 7000. That's the one in the Reagan Library that was bought by President Nixon. And the 707s, one of the things, as I said, their main job is to provide secure and safe air transportation for the president. The 747 came along. It really, really helped us a great deal. We didn't have the refrigeration on the airplane. On the 707, we had dry ice containers with frozen food in the belly, because one of my jobs is to make sure to provide all the services on the airplane, but to make sure that nothing that was consumed on that airplane by anybody was tampered with. So, you think of the food and the drinks and the beverages. What about the chewing gum and the mouthwash and the toothpaste and everything like that? So that's the major. When we got to 747, Chief Haig was my boss at the time. I was his deputy, and we convinced Boeing to let the people in their workspace get involved in the design of their own workspace instead of just the engineers. And that was based on our experience on the 707. They had a galley on the 707, the front galley, that we fed sometimes 24 to 36 people, that was big as two phone booths. And it was designed by an engineer. It looked nice, but he never cooked a meal. So we got involved with the 747 and ended up with fabulous galleys. And then the refrigeration on that, you've heard about, they were buying a new airplane. The refrigeration on the airplane, we had huge refrigerator and freezers in the belly of the airplane, which we could walk down and get to, in the front galley and the back galley. And there's a special ground power unit on that airplane that keeps that refrigeration going if we're sitting on the ground in Cairo for any long period of time in the desert, whatever it is. So to have refrigeration, you can always cook something on something, but can you keep it refrigerated where it doesn't go bad? So that's a major thing. The airplane, when they bought it, the 747, one of the things we used as a reason that we could refuel the airplane in the air, it can stay airborne. The 747 can stay airborne for 72 hours. Now, I don't want to be on the airplane for 72 hours, but it's supposed to be able to do that. Uh, but it really does a fantastic job. It's 5,000 square feet. And we were able to design the airplane. The flight attendants were very involved in the location of the seats and how the bathrooms were set up and how everything. One of the examples, Boeing, if you flew on a lot of airplanes, if you go to the bathroom, you go walk through the galley to get to the bathroom. So the first thing we did was put the bathrooms in front of the galley. So and then they took it and now they're doing that to all the airplanes now. So in fact, they were very happy with the finished product. However, and I don't know if this was reported to the press, but I was told we contracted for 2 747s, and Reagan's the one who ordered the airplanes the first part of his second term. And I was standing there next to him, and he said, if I knew I was going to win with such a landslide, I should have ordered them first term. And George Bush has received them in 1990, and they did that concept of letting the worker get involved with the engineers. When they built the 777, they did that, and they ended up with a better product. But cost-wise, we bought them for $250 million. The cost override came to $650 million.
That's each for both?
For both, which is cheap nowadays. Okay. But the fact is that we still paid, the taxpayer paid $250 million for a $650 million worth of airplanes. What I was told, and I'm a little bit involved in it, during the Trump administration, they purchased 2 747, the big models. I can't remember what they termed it. And the Russians had ordered them because they're not even manufacturing that airplane anymore. And they were brand new airplanes. The Russians had bought them, and they turned them down. So we picked them up at a good price. And they're down in Texas being remodded right now. I don't know what the colors of the airplanes are going to be, but they're going to be spectacular. For moving the president and doing what he's got to do, there's not another airplane in the world I know that could do such a good job as that airplane.
When Air Force One goes up, does it have any fighter escort or whatever else?
Well, it depends on what the threat is. If you're in a location where there's a threat, it probably would have. It always has a air rescue airplane flying around with us. It always has a backup airplane. They had the 2 707s, and then they had the 2 747s. If the president leaves Washington D.C. Andrews Air Force Base and it goes further than an hour, the second airplane takes off and is in the air. If it's less than an hour, the second airplane stays hot on the ramp and ready to go. And that's because if something happened to the primary airplane, it would come in and they'd switch places. Then there's the kneecap airplane. That's the general's airplane out of the former Strategic Air Command. That's the airplane that they would have all the communications from for World War III in the airplane in the air. That follows them around. Nobody sees it. They have a Gulfstream Senex bird that follows them around. So it's quite a facility. Now I'll say this. They quote you this price that's going to cost $30 million to move a president. Well, sir, the reality is if the airplane's not flying with the president, it's going to be flying in and out of Brunswick County. Wilmington to shoot and touch and goes because the pilots have to stay trained. Okay.
Right.
So we're not saving any money. In fact, everybody's got to go to work. Everybody gets paid whether they're going on a presidential trip or not. Now, there's definitely some extra cost that wouldn't, but it doesn't cost more. Air Force One usually is under budget every year because you understand the concept. The airplanes, whether it's not flying with the president, it's going to fly.
Right. And the people are going to get paid.
Yeah, I realized that a long time ago. I remember when Georgetown with that preacher, all those people committed suicide drinking the Kool-Aid down in South America. I was sitting here watching the news, and They said we sent a 141 in there to pick up all the bodies, and it cost the government $450,000. That's a bunch of baloney. The crew was going to get paid, and they were going to fly anyway.
Right.
It didn't cost extra.
Yeah, yeah, maybe some gas.
Well, they're going to use the gas anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
They
too.
got to fly. They got to fly around here. Recently, the Osprey was grounded for at least 3 months, and they couldn't fly. Well, they finally got okay. Last I heard, they only had 3 airplanes qualified to fly, and these guys, they're young kids. Young kids. I mean, they look like junior high school kids flying these airplanes around, and they got to train. They got to train all over the country. They got to fly. If they're not in, they're training to save their lives and to save somebody. My chairman of my board is a former 82nd Airborne Commander, Colonel Willie Gore, super gentleman, grew up here in Brunswick County, and his statement is probably not politically correct. When somebody complains about the noise, he said it's the sound of freedom.
I like that. That's something I think I'll use the next time too. Okay, Howie, believe it or not, we've run through our time already. This has been fascinating. I want to thank you for sharing a lot with us. And the 2 terms you were with Chief Stewart, and the rest of the presidents, you were a steward on the plane. So I got that correct this time.
Yes, thank you.
And I hope that, we could bring you back again sometime and, continue the conversation. But thank you very much.
Well, if you get a chance, come over to the airport, take a look at the souvenirs that we absconded over the years. And I got a whole bunch of photographs that were on the bulkheads of Air Force One. So we got a lot of history over here. My board likes.
We'll come and do a remote with you one day.
Yeah.
There we go.
Absolutely.
We can make that happen.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
I think at this point, everybody, we've had a great show, a fascinating show,
Very good show.
a very informative show.
Yes.
And we thank you for listening to Reclaiming America. Remember, this show will go up on Monday, and you can watch us from that point on. Go to YouTube and look for Reclaiming America and some of those other sites that were mentioned earlier. So anyway, thank you for listening to Reclaiming America, and we'll see you next week.